Okay, welcome everybody to the webinar Aptem Masterclass on accessing OData today. Headed up by Mark Abrahams, our Head of Research and Analytics. I can still see a few more attendees are coming in, but we're going to get started at the minute, and naturally this is being recorded as well for everybody's benefit. Ahead of the webinar today, just to give you an update, as mentioned, we will be recording the session and uploading it to the Aptem Help Centre so that you can share this with colleagues or refer back to it at a later date. You will be on mute, so if you need any assistance during the webinar, please use the questions function on the right-hand panel of GoToWebinar. There will be a short opportunity to have questions answered at the end of this session, so please do put your questions into the panel as well. Mark and I will be available throughout the webinar today to answer any questions as we're going, and naturally if we don't have the opportunity to answer them during the session, we will follow up individually afterwards and share any generic questions that we can on the Help Centre also. We also request today that you give your full attention to the webinar, watching, listening, and please do ask any questions that you have. And once the webinar is complete, please feel free to re-watch and apply what you have learned in your tenants in your own time. So to give you a bit of an introduction today, my name's James. I'm going to be facilitating the webinar with Mark today. I've worked in the vocational training sector for over 7 years, working with various sizes of ITPs and working in apprenticeships and work-based learning. And I'll hand over to Mark to introduce himself.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Mark, Head of Research and Analytics. Basically, extensive experience of applying analytics to learning, education, and talent assessment. I've been working with Aptem for the last 12 years now. Okay, James.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Okay, so let's introduce the agenda for today. Firstly, we'll be covering an introduction to your OData feeds within your Aptem tenant or system, how to find out what data is actually available and be able to get the details on those data fields. We'll also, there'll be 2 demonstrations of how to access your data using Excel. Using Excel in this case rather than Power BI, because that is the tool that most people will be familiar with. The process for accessing data using Power BI is almost identical. And we'll also be having an introduction to the most frequently used data tables within OData, which will be of most use to you. Now let's look at what is OData. OData is a standard format for accessing information across the web. Without getting too technical, because actually you don't need to know the technical details, you're sending a query string or a web address containing the address of the data with additional parameters such as the table name, columns required. Sometimes this might involve a password as well. The Aptem system has a hidden way of authentication to connecting to the data, so you're not going to be at risk of exposing data. What you get back is a data table in the form of what's called a JSON string. Power BI and Excel automatically convert this into a spreadsheet format or a table. If you're using some other kind of software to connect to OData, and you could be using something like Python or other tools, then you'll need to convert it within that software. It's important to note that data is read-only access to the live data in the Aptem system, so you're only kind of importing it into Excel, Power BI, whatever tools you're using. You're not going to be able to alter any data in your Aptem system. And at the bottom of the screen, just to give you an indication, you're sending a kind of query that looks a bit like this, where you can see you've got the tenant name, the table, in which case is users, and then the select is sending the column names. This kind of happens automatically, and we'll demonstrate how to do that. Okay, so the benefits of using OData fundamentally allows you to access more detailed data from your Aptem system, which in turn enables you to build custom reports which are specific to your organization's reporting needs. It goes beyond Aptem's standard reporting solutions because if you're using some of the older reporting systems, capability, for example, use a generic reporting classic, Aptem Classic, the reporting only provides a single line of data per learner. Whereas in OData, you can get multiple data points and much more detailed data. OData, bringing your data in using OData allows you to create reporting specifically tailored to your organization's needs, allows you to manipulate and filter the data in any particular way, which again is not available in our standard reporting features. It also enables you to kind of create the visualizations of the data for your own purposes, for example, using your own branding or your particular reporting needs, for example, in terms of operational needs. Another advantage is that because OData is reporting on live data in your Aptem system, which is often changing, it enables you to create snapshots of the data in your system and save that data for historical reporting, for example, so you can make future comparisons against today or compared to the future when you have new data coming in. Before we move on, I think it's important to highlight the security and GDPR issues. With Aptem, administrators who use the system are going to be logging in with a unique username and password. However, if you connect to the OData feed, for example, in an Excel file, which can be saved somewhere, the authentication details will be automatically saved within that file. And anyone with access to that file will have access potentially to personal data, regardless of which computer they use. Because the Excel file or Power BI file has been created and accessed outside of Aptem, it's not protected by the permissions and immutability that's attached to each Aptem user. Therefore, we warn you to be careful with who you share those files with and ensure that they are authorized to use that data in your Aptem system. We also recommend that additional protections are applied to these files in terms of passwords, etc. And just, of course, everyone is aware these days that not following secure procedures could result in a breach of the GDPR regulations. So before we get into the detail, I would like to draw your attention to the OData section of our support website. Here you will find instructions on how to connect Excel and Power BI to your OData feed. This webinar, as I said before, will include a demonstration of connecting to Excel, so you can see that it's fairly straightforward to do, and you can do this without having any kind of technical expertise. But you can see on screen a screenshot of the Help Center page. The section also includes an OData dictionary, which describes which fields are available and including descriptions of those fields. For example, where a field is a corresponding field in the individual learner record, so the document lists the code for those fields. So if you're looking for a particular field like FFI, you can then find it in the document and know where to find it in your OData feed. In total, there are currently 26 tables available in the OData feed. You can see a list here, and we will be going through some of these tables in more detail, so you can see what data is available. Important to note here that not all data we store is available in OData, and requests to add more data points need to be made via our support team. Each month we are updating and continually exposing more data to the feed, so it's a growing resource. So within the OData tables, in order to access a table, each table we need its own separate query. One of the most important tables is the users table, which is number 26 on this list. and that's equivalent to the user generic report that's seen in Classic. Number 22 on this list is the organizations table, and that is equivalent to the organizations generic report. There are other important tables in this document list, and we'll be going through them in a little bit more detail later, but I'll just draw your attention to the ILR aims table. Lists the aims of for every learner in your Aptem system. Reviews, as it is labeled, lists all of the reviews for each learner. We can also access trackers and onboarding responses. So how can you access the data and know what's there? We supply what's called a metadata file, which lists the contents of your OData feed. To view the metadata for your system, you simply use the web address that you can see displayed on screen with your own Aptem tenant name. I'll actually demonstrate this later. The metadata list gives you all of the available OData tables. You just have to search the page for the phrase container, and you can see the list on screen at the moment. And then within this document, which you can download and save locally, for each table, there's a detailed list of all of the fields in that table, including any custom fields created within your account. So let's look at the users table to start with. This is the index table for all learners, tutors, administrators, and job seekers within your Aptem system. There is one record for each person, providing headline information such as subscription details, contact details, and for learners, headline information for their current learning plan. As I've already highlighted, this table is comparable to the user generic report in Aptem Classic, and you will find other information in this table, for example, headline data on progress within their current learning plan. And this table is what's called the key table, reference table within OData. It contains an ID column which can be used to cross-reference learner information in other tables. So the ID column in the users table will correspond to fields called learner ID or admin ID or user ID in the other tables. Some of these references are also given in more detail in the OData dictionary, which is downloadable from our help center. So here's an example on screen of what the first set of columns for the users table looks like. You can see, and for those that are more technical, this may be useful, is you can see the name of the field under the property name equals, and then the type of the field, be it an integer or a string or a date. The OData dictionary, as on our website, support site, provides information on the most frequently, the common fields in each table. However, because Aptem is customizable to your business process, each tenant, each system will have its own set of customized fields, reviews with your bespoke review names, skills radar assessments with, again, unique characteristics and criteria. So we recommend looking at the metadata feed for your own system, which will display the names of every data field within your system, including custom fields and system-specific fields. Also to highlight that the number of fields in the users table can actually be quite large, especially where there are a large number of reviews or skills radar and custom fields. It's worth highlighting that, for example, for each review type and each element of a skills radar will have a specific field in this table. So in terms of trying to understand what custom fields you have available within your OData feed, this should help. Again, it's also information that's in the OData dictionary document. Any field that has the prefix user ADECT gr_gr model, and then there'll be a name of the field, it will be the the name shown in the OData will be the same as the label you see within your system, except with the spaces removed. So everything would be concatenated. So any custom field in the user details section of like the learner profile or user profile will be viewed with this prefix. If you have this customized compliance documents, they will have a prefix of compliance documents _ADIT_GR model, and then the name of the compliance document. And this again gives you the field will give you the status of that compliance document, for example, when it was signed, if it's signed, and the date it was signed. Often our customers have custom fields that are used in onboarding, and again, onboarding _ADIT_GR model gives you the content or the response provided by the learner if they completed that question in the onboarding process. All of these in the users table. It's important to note that the data displayed in the table is only for a learner's current program. So if you are looking for data, onboarding data from a previous program, for example, where a learner's started an onboarding program, then within Aptem, then moved on to a delivery program, I'll refer you to the onboarding responses table, which is a separate table in OData, which gives you all responses made by a learner within Aptem across any onboarding program that they may have completed. User reviews, again, custom field there. Everyone has different names for their reviews, and the most recent occurrence of a particular review name will be in the users table. And also in terms of skills radar data, the most recent response to a skills radar item will also be displayed in the users table. You'll see a prefix of characteristics levels _ 1005 or 1001 or 1008. It tends to vary. Then there'll be the name of the high level name of the overall name of the skills radar, and then the actual question, again with spaces removed, so it's easy to find that data. Most of our OData fields will be imported as a single column into Excel or Power BI. However, there are some fields in your OData feed that may be labeled as navigation property. From this screenshot of the user table, you can see that the last few fields, for example, have this label. For example, in Aptem, a learner can belong to more than one group. A learner can have a main program and a sub-program. A learner can have more than one case owner, secondary owners who are supporting them. For example, the additional case owners will be involved in delivering sub-programs or sections of their Aptem learning plan. So these properties are basically lists within lists. When you import these into Excel or Power BI, they can be expanded into separate records, and I'll be demonstrating this later in our session. So let's go through the steps for using Excel to connect to OData. The first step is to get an API key from the Aptem support team. This is basically the password that will allow you to connect to your OData. It's important to note that each key will be unique to each Aptem administrator. Then the next step will be from the Aptem support website to get a copy of the OData query for the users table. We have some detailed instructions on how to connect to the OData. However, to try and make things easier, there's also a set of sample queries that you can use, and they can be edited to access other tables where we haven't provided samples, and I'll be demonstrating that in a moment. So basically, open a new Excel workbook, click on the link to get data, open a what's called a blank query, and then we paste in the sample query. edit the query to include your tenant name and also the API key. If it's the incorrect API key, then it won't connect. As in, if you don't add the right password, it won't connect. Accept the changes, and the data should load. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate how to act the process of accessing the users table in Excel. I'm going to be following the steps that we've just laid out. So firstly, I have an blank Excel file. But if we just go initially to the Aptem Help Center, if I just type OData into the search, and we go to the OData section, this is the OData dictionary section, where if I scroll down, there's a link to the file that can be downloaded. But here also we have a set of instructions on how to connect your data to Excel using OData, and these are the steps laid out. At the bottom of the document is some sample queries. So we're going to highlight those queries and copy them, paste them into Excel. So if we go to Excel, we click on Data, Get Data. From other sources, there's a blank query option. We click on that. And a new window will appear. I'm going to rename it Users Table for reference. And it is possible to build up the query step by step, but as we've got a sample query already prepared, we click on Advanced Editor. We take our sample query and we just paste it in. I need to now edit this query, so I'm using a tenant called Power BI Demo in this instance. I'll also be adding a key. And click Done. And as you can instantly see, the query is loaded into this Power Query Editor. And very simply, when I click Loads and Load, it will load into Excel. Before we do that, I just wanted to kind of highlight a few points, really. Firstly, we have a number of columns that have been loaded in here. As I mentioned before, that the users table can be quite large and comprise of, in some cases, hundreds of columns. And the columns that are included in the default query may not be the ones that you want to use. So if we have this, in this interface here, you'll see that we have a query settings pane, properties section, and applied steps section. If we click on the little cog next to remove other columns, what will happen is that a choose columns dialog pops up, and we can scroll down and literally see all kinds of fields like email address, login name, personal details such as address, mobile number, etc., etc. I'm not going to show that. This is, even though this is anonymized data. Summary of user summary is a summary of activity in the system. You may have personal information custom fields. User program underscore provides information on the learner's progress in their current program. For example, their current program status, the type of program, the delivery type being an onboarding or delivery program, the current program name, the start date, which administrator assigned them to that program, which is applied by. And if I continue to scroll down, we have ILR summary data. So for example, I could add the LRN number to this query by literally just ticking. And then what I can add the program type, the standard code, for example. If we continue on, there's more information in terms of the learning plan summary, and this will be in details, including such as when the last date they submitted some evidence, their learning plan, when they last received feedback, their expected progress, and as opposed to their actual progress. All of these fields are reportable through the users table. Information on the learner's employer, and here you can see for the current program, the onboarding responses, default compliance documents, and if we can go down even further, where it says characteristic levels, these are the beginnings of skills radar data that's also in this. So if I click, we can also search. So if I click here, what will happen is that the fields will update, and we'll see that program type and LRN number have now been added. In the same way, we can also remove fields by using this cog feature and unchoosing columns effectively. One can search for columns. I'm going to add groups in order to show you the groups feature. And if I click on groups and click OK, again, that is added as a column. And it's important to note that whenever you create a query using the OData feed, you must choose the columns. This is because some of our data tables are very large, and if you don't select the particular columns you need, it's good practice if you're just to include the data you need to analyze, but also not doing that could result in a very large, excessively large table, and the query may time out because it's just too large. That's possible, unlikely but possible. Choose columns icon here on the Power Query is the same as clicking on this cog. So going back to the addition of the groups, we mentioned before that the learners can belong to more than one group, and this is one of those examples of a navigation property. The way to deal with this is that when you add it to a table, you will see this little icon, and it will say table, because it's a list within a list. If we click on the icon, we can then expand these items, and what then happens is that we have additional columns added, and there will be a separate column basically for each group or for that learner. So where a learner's in more than one group, there will be additional information. I'm going to now remove that section by clicking on the X. Okay, the other thing you can do in this Power Query is before we load the data, sometimes you're only interested in learners, for example, who have, say, are learners, users, rather than administrators, or only those that might only have a full subscription, for example. So I'm going to just, if we click on the little arrow, just like you're clicking on a filter in an Excel table, we can unselect some of these, click OK, and the steps in the query tells me that the filtered rows, the rows have been filtered. If I now click on Close and Load, what will happen is that Excel will connect and download all of the data, and this little pane pops up here to show me that 2,466 rows have been imported. And that is simply your user's data into Excel. Okay. So the key points to remember when you're connecting to OData is, firstly, in the query, you must choose the specific columns from the table. As I said before, this is because some tables are large. Each API key, which is the key that I posted into the query when we first edited it, is attached to an individual Aptem administrator account, and only data for the groups assigned to that account, that administrator, can be viewed. So there are circumstances that happened in the past where, for example, the group structure of your Aptem tenant has changed, or new groups have been added, and those new groups have been added in a way that aren't visible to that administrator, and therefore that API key or password won't be able to accept that data. Secondly, have if you create a connection, say an Excel file with an API key, and that the administrator account associated with that key expires or is closed, cancelled, then again, the OData won't connect because that's not a valid account within Aptem. So sometimes you need to update the API key as well. When that happens, each query in your Excel file or Power BI file will need to be updated with a new key. Just like changing a password on any other system, you change the password, the old password doesn't work. It's similarly, every time if you're accessing multiple tables, you will have multiple queries in Excel. So in this situation, we will have a list of queries here, and each one of them will need to be edited to change the query, the key. I will show you how to do that in a moment. So before we move on to adding more queries, let's look at what other data is available within your OData feed. So firstly, each learner has a unique user ID or learner ID, and each learner within Aptem will be on a program with a program ID. And within the users table, there's a field called user program ID, which gives the ID of the learner's current program. But if a learner's participated in in other Aptem programs, then it may be that they've got data from previous programs held in Aptem, and these will have obviously a different ID. So what I'm going to go through is the other available tables that allow you to get detailed information on current activity within Aptem as well as past activity within Aptem. For example, where learners have moved from an onboarding program into a delivery program, or they've completed one delivery program in Aptem, say a level 2 apprenticeship, and then they've moved on to a level 3 apprenticeship, for example. So most of these data tables will reference not only the learner ID, but also the program ID, and that is quite important when you're trying to match up data, to be able to be aware of matching data on both of those. So the first key table I want to talk about is the episodes table. This basically is one record for each main program per learner, and there's also a separate record for each sub-program. So if you want to know, we wanted a complete list of which programs are being completed by which learners, and also which associated sub-programs are there. This is the table, the episodes table. This is what you go to. And the episodes table, like many other tables, it contains learner ID and program ID as indexes. These tables don't include any other kind of personal information about the learner, for example, their name, postcode, date of birth, etc. All of those personal details are stored in the users table only. So these are effectively indexed anonymized tables. So if you wanted to look at the episodes table, you'd also need to do a lookup against the users table to get the learner's name. The ILR aims table lists basically one record or one row for each aim for every learner and every episode of learning or program within Aptem. It contains all of the relevant ILR fields, such as aim reference number, aim type, funding model, program type, maybe the standard code or the framework code if you're looking at historical data. And this data can be used to look at detailed progress and tracking. It also has all of the achievement dates, planned end dates, start dates, actual end dates, and so on for each aim in this table. And again, it's indexed by learner ID and program ID. And this data corresponds to other tables, for example, apprenticeship financial records, which is a multi-row table where, for example, you'll have PMR or TMP records for those delivering apprenticeships against multiple aims. So they'll be referenced by learner ID and program ID and aim reference number in these tables. Similarly, with awarding body qualifications, this table contains relevant information about qualification registrations and so on. There'll be one record for each qualification, which includes the current assessment status. Again, they're referenced by the learner, the program, and the aim. You can do a match-up. And the data would include registration date, achievement date, certification date. And then a more detailed table actually related to that is something called the awarding body qualifications assessment history items. What that is a list of all of the examinations that a learner might be put through. When you look at the assessment history view in Aptem console, that's the information you see, and it's all available in that table at OData. And also another frequently used OData table is compliant documents, particularly important for government funding training, where you need to ensure you have this compliance documentation fully signed. So there, in this table, again, for each learner and each program name, program ID, there's one record for each document, and then it shows the signature status, when the document's fully signed or not. And again, that can be linked back to ILR aims data if needed. There are a number of delivery-related tables within Aptem. So we have learning plan components, which is a very large table for most customers. It lists every component, every program, every learner user in your system. Includes, whatever the type of learning plan component, be it online learning, a review, a task, a meeting, the dates around start dates, completed dates, signed dates, also which tutor or administrator signed off the completed work. There's also data there in terms of how many pieces of evidence for each learning plan component were submitted, how many were passed, how many were rejected, which I know many of our customers wish to report on. The reviews table provides a list of every review for every program and user. And this includes reviews that can be created outside of learning plans within Aptem. Again, the fields include the information you'd expect, such as the status of review, the planned date, the completed date, the actual scheduled date. Trackers table lists every tracker that's in your system, including the standard dates such as when it was closed, when it was opened, when it was resolved. Also within the tracker table, each tracker has information that's specific to that tracker, and that is also available within this table. And finally, onboarding responses lists where you're using custom-made onboarding questionnaires. This table lists every onboarding question and whether a response was given by the learner, if the response was given by the learner, what that response was and what the date was. And that again is indexed by the learner ID, the program ID, and also the step in the onboarding questionnaire. There are additional sets of tables I haven't yet talked about, which relate to organizations and engagement. So in Aptem Classic, there is an organizations report, which gives you information on each organization. That corresponds to the organizations table. You can also, and I know a number of customers do this, you want a file which lists all of the contacts within each organization. So all of the contacts within your system, indexed by organization, are in the organization's contacts table. And I know some customers are working with kind of employer groups where there's a number of organizations, for example, working under a group structure. And again, the employee groups table gives you information on that structure, so you can combine data from different related organizations into one data set for analysis. Let's look in a little bit more detail at the trackers table. As I mentioned before, there's one record for each tracker. There are multiple records per learner, which are indexed by learner ID and program ID. And each record provides information on the tracker type, the tracker status, who created it, the description of the tracker, and relevant dates. And also there can be detailed information that's specific to the tracker type. So I'd like to demonstrate how to connect to the tracker table and add it to our existing Excel file that we started with. So here's our Excel file. Probably before I start doing that, if I just show you very quickly the OData dictionary and scroll down to the tracker table, as you can see on screen, I'll just increase that in size. Here, as you can see in our metadata, this lists all of the fields that are available in the tracker table. If you look at other fields, again, all the information is available. So there are a number of ways of doing this. I don't have a sample tracker query to hand, so I'm going to demonstrate how to edit our existing query and access that data. So firstly, we click on Get Data and we launch the Power Query Editor. And I'm going to duplicate the existing query by clicking on Duplicate. And we now have two queries. One's a copy of the other. I'm going to rename this query Tracker or Trackers. And I'm going to remove the filtered step. So currently, this query is pointing at the users table, but if I click on the source part, you can see that what appears is a list of all of the tables in this system. If I can click on Tracker, there's a table link here. So it says Trackers. If I click here, it tells me I'm going to replace the current step. And now you can see that it's called Trackers table. And what we have is a number of fields, and we can then click on Choose Columns to select which columns we want. I'm going to take out the description just in case there's any information we shouldn't see there. So what we have is the tracker ID, the learner's ID, program ID, the type of tracker, and in this particular example, we have a few different trackers available, but I think they're all ILR trackers and other fields. Also the status of the tracker, whether it's resolved or not, who the author is, i.e. the tutor or administrator who raised that tracker, and the relevant dates, resolve date, close date, start date. We also have custom fields, so I'm going to follow the same process before. Click on the little expansion item, click on OK, and in this case, I think the only custom field we have is exclude from ILR batch. But if there are other fields, there will be multiple columns added, concatenated added to the end of this table. We now click Close and Load. What you'll see that happens is we have both queries here, and the tracker data is automatically added to our Excel workbook. So we have two tabs now, the trackers and the users table. And you might want to add the learner's name to the trackers, because here we only have the tracker ID. So as a quick demonstration of matching up data, you can use VLOOKUP in Excel. So we could add a new column. Maybe I should add it in the report. And we'll call it full name. And we can add an Excel formula, VLOOKUP. For example, the lookup value would be the learner ID. The table array would be users table, and it knows exactly where that is already. If I just click on there, the full name is, that's the first column, second, third, fourth, fifth column, right? So users table, the fifth column, and we use false to make sure that it does an in fact lookup. And as you can see, that column then is updated with the learner's full name. So using VLOOKUPs is a method that in Excel that you can easily drag information from one table into another. There are, if you're familiar, if you have someone technical on your team who's familiar with Power BI and databases, you can actually link the tables together in Power BI in the database type method, and that will automatically pull the data together should you need to. Now, in this situation, we might want to filter the data and say, well, who's got a new tracker? And just by clicking on the filter, click new, and we can see that we have all of these people have new trackers. And we can, for example, also filter by when the tracker was last updated or sort the list. So the most recently updated tracker was, this individual. So hopefully that gives you an indication of how you can pull data together, and also take an existing query in Aptem in OData feed and quickly pivot it to point at one of the other tables within your OData system, your Aptem system. Okay, just to recap then on the OData dictionary. We have data stored across 26 tables. The exact fields in your system will vary depending on the custom and bespoke data collected in your tenant. I cannot overemphasize the usefulness of the metadata feed that gives you a description of all of the fields in your system. Many commonly used data points are currently available through OData. I'm going to say we're adding more data points each month. All of the ILR fields, for example, are in there. And the dictionary lists all of the common fields that could be used, and you can filter the Excel OData dictionary by table name, field name, etc. Okay. So finally, the OData feeds basically provide access to detailed data points in your Aptem system. The data can be imported into Excel and Power BI, but also many other reporting analysis tools. For example, Python, R, Tableau, Click. We have other customers who use the OData feeds to pull their data into quite sophisticated data warehouses. The OData dictionary will help on our help center, provides the information and field definitions. There's also a page in that document that actually shows the linkages and relationships between all the different tables. You can actually see, how do I connect, for example, the users table to the learning plan components table, or how do I connect the reviews table to the learning plan components table? That is detailed within that document. But bear in mind, final point, the data fields are based only on the live data within your Aptem account. And of course, the data will change day to day, hour to hour, depending on user activity. Now it's time for comments and questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And there has been a couple of questions raised, not very many at all, during that presentation. So thank you everybody for the questions that have been raised. We're going to go through a couple. They've all been answered incidentally, but we're just going to make a couple of them aware for everybody's benefit. So the first one, well, really the only one actually that we've got is, can you break down the OData via KSBs per component, Mark? Okay,
and thank you for the question, which I think came from Eleanor. Currently, the learning plan components table gives you a single record for each learning plan component in each learner's program. So if a learner's got multiple programs, there'll be one record, one row for each learning plan component. However, all of our customers have different programs, and the different mappings between learning plans and the KSBs. So although KSBs, and you can show progress in the console currently, you can view progress against, say, a qualification that's part of a program, and separately against, say, an apprenticeship standard that's part of a program. That mapping isn't at the moment available and reportable via OData. I will say this is something we're looking at, and we will be, we're working on it. But at the moment, it's not available. So you can only report on progress against the overall program at the moment via OData.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Mark. We've just had one more question, well, a couple of questions come in as well. Claire, do we request a field to be added via the Help Centre? I can see that LRN is available, but we need to report on LRN in previous funding year as the ILR field. Do you know anything about that, Mark, or are we going to have to take that one away?
Can you, hi Claire, can you raise that via the that request via the Aptem support team, and then we will look at it.
And then another question that's just come in from Desrin as well. Can you report on sub-programs?
Yes. Sub-programs, overall sub-programs are in the episodes table. If you're talking about reporting on progress within sub-programs, and you know which components are within sub-program, then you can report on those via the learning plan components table.
Perfect, thank you very much. Any other questions that we've having come through, we will answer and reach out individually to everybody. But once again, Mark, thank you very much for your time today. It was really interesting. Just for information for everybody as well, we do have some further upcoming Aptem webinars, details of which you can see on the screen. We do hope to see you there as well. Any past related webinars can be found in the announcement section of the Aptem Help Centre. This is also where we will make available the recording of this webinar as well for you. In the interest of time, everybody, it's been an absolute pleasure hosting this webinar for you today, and I hope you found it interesting. If there are any further questions, please do feel free to reach out to Mark. Email address is on the screen, or alternatively, you can contact us at hello@aptem.co.uk as well. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a lovely day.
Have a lovely day, everyone.